All the reports are found in this one screen in the Accrivia system. They are broken down by module, and then within each module we have the report tabs. Within each report tab we have our reports, and depending on the report you will have the availability of selection criteria. I'm double clicking. Branch or company selection to filter the data, including multi-select, where you can hold the control key down or the shift key. For those setups that have a number of entities in this list, we can establish groups. So when you click on the group, the system automatically selects the appropriate entities that fulfill that group. And that might be regional based, it might be company based in terms of actual ABN. You can hold the control key down to unselect and click. Depending on the report, other options will exist, including the ability to group the company information or to present it individually. So if you had the group box ticked and you preview the information, then all of the companies or branches will group together. If this was not ticked, then each branch will start on its own page. We can order the information on the report output if that option is available for that report. So this information is now ordered in quantity from highest to smallest. And this is now ordered from greatest amount to least amount. For those clients running the job system, the inclusion or exclusion of the job supply data indicates whether the system should include the supply of material in that report that went to the jobs. And it's important to note that if you were analysing the information in terms of stock turnover, you would want to include that information because the warehouse has indeed supplied that stock to the job. But if you are analysing it more from a profitability or an actual debtors trading perspective, then you may not wish to include that information because you're going to bill the job to the client at the appropriate time. And if we report on the supply of the stock to the job and we report on the job revenue, we are effectively doubling it up in a turnover sense. So whether or not to include the job supply data or not would depend on whether you are analysing the output in a financial sense or in a quantitative sense. The filter option allows us to stipulate conditions on the data that must be fulfilled for that data to be included on the report. And this would allow us to achieve something of an exception reporting type approach, where we are picking up values or a range of values that are outside the normal bounds of expectation, and as a result we can focus our time on analysing why that information is not what we're expecting it to be. So in this example, without any filtering applied, we would get the following. If I ask the system to supply information where the debtor's net amount, i.e. the sale less the GST, less any discounts that might have been taken, is less than $5,000, You can see now we've changed the actual output. We've also included in the selection criteria the filter that's been applied, which is important because if two reports are being analysed at a later stage and you're unaware of a filter being applied, you may misinterpret the data and consider it from a holistic perspective when in actual fact that's not the case. We can apply two filters per line, and that represents an or we can add additional lines and that represents an and. So here we have information where the quantity is less than a certain value and the net amount is also less than a certain value. It may be that we can create a selection criteria that excludes any records being returned. Control delete. And it may be that we want to pick up an or condition. So if our criteria was that we were trying to find any debtors that turned over less than 5,000 or more than 10,000, this would act as an or, not as an and. Fulfilling our, and you can see it in the selection criteria here, fulfilling our conditions to report these debtors. When we preview a report, we can export that information to PDF, or we can export it to a list of other types of formats, Excel probably being the most common. There exists a document that covers in detail these tick options. As a genuine rule, you would remove the what you see is what you get, remove the merge cells, probably remove the pictures, definitely remove the as text because you'll want to analyze the Excel information as numbers and sum it or whatever other actions you might wish to perform on it. Now the information is output, and as you can see, it's relatively clean and tidy, but we still have essentially some level of white space in that report, and that will depend entirely on the nature of the information and the type of report that it is. Obviously at this point we could clean it up and we can do various actions on the data. Sometimes you're wishing to output the information to Excel in a fairly clean data format so you can then perform further manipulation. In that situation, it might be appropriate to use the Data Export button rather than the Preview button. Both send the information to the screen, but the Data Export button prepares the format of the report in a clean way that removes the headers and footers and all the other information that might result in the Excel output needing further manipulation before we can use it. In addition to that, if there's page header information or group band information, we will put that in its own column. So you can sort on that or filter that or group on that or do what you wish. The export process is the same. The difference being the actual output would be cleaner. As you can see, we've reduced the number of columns and we've also reduced page breaks occurring. This information didn't have enough where that would have shown up, but had this information gone on for multiple pages, you would find that there would be no page break between the information. You would simply have one single header at the top, and in this case we've decided to leave the totals at the bottom. As I said before, the company column, which was a group band, is now appearing as its own data, so you could choose to filter or sort, etc. The other information on the preview window that's worth noting is the icons across the top. The first performs a print action. We can choose the printer and the properties. The export we've already spoken about. The PDF export we've already spoken about. You could choose to email it to someone. It will go out as an attachment, and depending on your email settings, it might go out straight through the server or use your Outlook. Those are options that can be configured on a workstation and server level. The binoculars allow us to find information. When you have only a single page of information, that serves little purpose, but if you had multiple pages, this would allow you to find that word on any page. The F3 key is the find next, and the system will keep searching for that same information you keyed in until such time as it can no longer find it. This can be very, very handy if you are struggling to find something in the Accrivia system that was posted, and I would recommend in that situation you run the most detailed report in that area and then use the binoculars to key in the little bit of information you may know, allowing the system to then go and find that. We can change the zoom. We can show a tree structure. And some of these actions will be more or less appropriate depending on the report you're running. So in this case, if we this shows us page selections to choose on the left. The arrow keys allow us to move backwards and forwards a page, or to the first page or to the last page. As with all of the tabs and all the reports, you can turn any of these off or on for any given user. And if you're not running the module that's appropriate for that group of reports, it's probably just worth turning the entire report group off. You can right-click to turn all the reports off or all the reports on. You'll see a yes up here representing whether or not that group is included, or you can double-click on individual reports. The last detail I wish to mention with regards to the general report usage is the ability to report on detailed or summary information in some of the reports. Over time, we will probably move a lot more of the reports in this direction, where we don't need to show, for example, a summary and detailed report in their own merit, but rather a single report exists and you choose whether you want to run it in summary or a detailed mode by using the tick box at the lower part of the screen. So for this particular example, if I was to run this in a detailed mode, I would see the information broken down by person, and I would see every individual entry that made up that pay type for each person. And this report is 6 pages long. If I was to take the tick out, so now I'm only showing it in a summary mode, and run that same report, my report is only 2 pages long, and where I had individual entries for each person showing, I now get a single line representing the total for that person and that pay type. Now this is just an example of a report that does this, and it's in the payroll module. anytime this tick box appears, that report is enabled for a summary and detailed mode. Any report can be included as a favourite report. The Favourites tab appears at the bottom and is available to every single user, regardless of what other reports have been turned on or off for any given user. We can right click on a report and choose which Favourites tab to add it to. And now if we go to that Favourites tab, we'll see the report appearing there. The selection criteria will of course still be valid for that report. To remove a report from Favourites, we right click and choose Remove. I now wish to cover each of the modules in Accrivia and where the reports are found and what each tab typically represents in terms of reporting. For the Creditors module, we have file maintenance type reports, anything that relates to the accounts setup and the data at a file maintenance type level. The credit dollars relates to financial information throughout the creditor system. The Cred Transactions tab relates to transaction-based postings, making a distinction between the header of a document, which is essentially a transaction, an invoice, a payment, etc., or the details of the document, which in this case in the creditor system would be the expense breakdown or allocation of that invoice. So the creditor transactions report will include transactional type information. We do include the comments, but there's no further breakdown in terms of expenses on this report, and it does include transactions that are not just invoices and credit notes. And this would hold true for all of the reports on this tab, representing different information, representing the same information presented in different ways. The expense reports show the allocation or the breakdown of invoices and credit notes within the creditors and where that was allocated to. Summary versus detailed, as the name suggests, will give you high levels of summary or the same information but with every docket included. Depending on whether you have certain modules running, certain reports may be quite irrelevant, and I would generally recommend turning those off because they just represent clutter. For example, if you weren't running the job system, then to list the expenses and the allocation of that in terms of the job number is not going to return any data. The Cred Pay tab represents anything related to payments within the creditor's system. Obviously with each of these I can select a creditor account to use and a date range. That was a double click to bring up the creditor. And then this would show a payment and the allocation of that payment. And lastly, any invoices or credit notes in the creditor system that relate to stock purchasing or the inventory system. This includes the capabilities of rebates, and rebates in the creditors are determined by the setting up of the rebate information on the actual debtor and whether or not that item or that group has a supplier rebate appropriate. So in this situation, we may be paying the customer a rebate for purchases, but we might also receive a rebate from the supplier. In addition to that, there may be general rebates purely based on volume purchasing. The debtors module has the most number of reports in the Accrivia system because it's the way you trade with your customers that distinguishes you as an organisation. By and large, the accounting modules are used in a similar way across most organisations. For general ledger, for example, or the cash book, the creditors, all of these things that relate to primary accounting actions are generally performed in a standard type way to arrive at a known set of outcomes. The debtors identifies the unique elements of you as an organisation in terms of both the way you sell, what you sell, how you deal with your customers, your profitability intentions, your turnover intentions. All of these aspects require some level of reporting to harvest the information so decisions can be made as to how the business is travelling, and so decisions can be made for the future. As a result, the majority of the reports in the system over time that we've built for clients have been added to the debtors system. As you can see, there are 2 rows of tabs, and depending on the size of your form, that can sometimes become 3 rows. And I now want to run through each of these just quickly and cover what's typically found on these tabs. The inquiry tab relates to an inquiry type investigation on a debtor's account. You will get a new page starting for each debtor, and history allows us to pick up what's in current and in past. The distinction being when an end of month process is run, all of the transactions that are fully reconciled are moved from the current to the history tables in the system, and that's purely for the purpose of speed. So when we are going through the current data looking for information, we don't have to go through many years of data. But if we wish to report on the whole of the account or sales or any other aspect, we can join that information back together. The Docket tab relates to your invoices, your quotes, your orders, any docket that's produced as part of the primary trading process in the organisation. The On Order tabs relate to customers' orders that are in the system that are not filled. Typically an end of month process would be to monitor these type of reports and to check the information that's in the system. Perhaps from a debtor's perspective, to make sure that any orders that should have been filled have been, and to follow up any open orders that shouldn't be there. The Debtor Information tab is a little bit like a file maintenance type set of reports. Listing something of a data dump for the various pieces of information in the system related to the debtor's accounts. The raw file maintenance information gives us the reports related to the menus found within the debtor file maintenance area. The debtor sales tabs, and there's quite a few of them, relate to debtor sales. There is no profitability on these tabs, it's purely turnover information. So the audience of these reports is generally a larger group of people than when we talk profitability and the profit reports in the organisation. At a transactional level, stock level, we can report on what's been happening. Some of these reports will have selection criteria where you can stipulate the time frame. If you don't do that and it's required, the system will throw an error and force you to enter it. If it's required but you don't stipulate it and we can resolve that we will start with today's date or today's month, then we'll do so. And some of these reports may or may not be relevant depending on your trading organisation and the system settings that have been set up. Serial number sales, for example, wouldn't apply to any clients not running our serial stock module. The square metre reports are plasterboard specific and relate to square metre turnover. The items that are included on these reports are those that have M2 in the per field. If an item is sold by the square metre but is not actually bought, for example a delivery charge, it's appropriate to put a full stop at the end of that so the system doesn't see it as actual product sales of square metres. And if we did that for a delivery line, for example, we would double up. Obviously the scalar multiplied by the quantity of sheets sold is what we are then reporting in the system. The debt sales 1, 2 and 3 tabs are all information related to sales presented with different grouping. So the primary reports are around stock, group summary, item summary. So we are now showing that information within the group. You can see here we show the percentage of sales within that group. So in this example, the accessories group, 69% of the sales was derived from the 30mm clouts, and this group contributed 9% of the sales overall for the company. If we went back to this report, you would see the actual groups in terms of their contribution to the bottom line in a sales percentage sense. All figures here are ex-GST, and the GST shows at the bottom of the screen. In this example, we are not seeing a clear 10% because the job income and job supply sales are included and they would not have GST on them. We are simply moving stock internally from our warehouse to our own jobs. If you were not running the job system and you did not have export debtors, you would expect to see a 10% ratio with regards to the GST. The same information can be run by debtor. In this example, we can see 25% of our sales for this time frame came from that debtor, 12, 23, etc. We could order this by quantity or net amount, creating something of a best performer to worst performer in a sense. Keeping in mind we're not seeing margins, so while a given debtor could be very high on the sales percentage, if they were very low on the margin percentage, then arguably they are not your best performer and they are quite possibly costing you money to deal with. My recommendation would be to run all of these reports after you've been trading for a little while and just familiarise yourself with what is available, perhaps even turn off the ones that you could never see yourself using so you get rid of the clutter. Sales rep analysis. In this situation, we can choose between the sales rep that was applied to the sale at the time versus the sales rep that is associated with the debtor's account. Depending on your organisational rules, it may be possible for that sale to have been allocated to a different sales rep because we can change that at the time the sale is made. Sales 2 relates to debtor type analysis and debtor area analysis. If you have not set these up or they're not linked to the debtor's account, then obviously the information that returns in this area will be of little value. And you can see some of the debtors in the training system haven't actually been allocated to a debtor's type. This is retrospective. If we were to change that on the debtor right now and rerun the report, it would re-report the information correctly. That's not the case with sales reps that were applied to the sale. That will never change. And lastly, invoice type analysis. Again, if that feature's been enabled, you would be required to classify each invoice sale with a certain type that hasn't been set up in the training system. The debtor profit reports 1, 2, and 3 are actually the same as the debtor sales reports, but we include the additional 3 columns that relate to margin. So here we can see not only our sales, 25%, but we also show the total cost of those sales, giving us a margin in a financial sense and as a percentage. And we also show what percentage the debtor contributed towards our bottom line in a profit percentage sense. Clearly, we are looking for good sales volumes with good profitability margin to represent a good contribution towards our bottom line. High sales on low margin or low sales on high margin is obviously contributing a lesser value to the bottom line. And if your overheads were, for example, 12%, then every debtor that contributed under 12% as a percentage overall in terms of gross margin, arguably it's costing you to deal with them. There may be rebates to take into account, there may be other intangible benefits of trading with that customer, but certainly something to be aware of. You can see the company's overall position here for the Melbourne branch was 26%. If we were to rerun that information with the grouping turned on, we've actually got a fairly flat 27% if we include the other branch. So the same information applies for the debtor profit reports as did for the sales reports, but as I said, we will show the margin information. We can also order by that, and we can also filter by that. So again, talking exception reporting, if you were trying to focus on the debtors that returned a low margin or perhaps a high margin that you believe to be inaccurate, you might choose to put that in for a filter and then run these reports. The debtor trial balance tab has trial balance information, in other words, what our debtors owe us. The days column shows the average number of days for that debtor to pay. A positive number means they paid that many days after the time frame they should have, and a negative number means they paid that many days before. As you put receipts into the system, we will be calculating this on a weighted average for the last 12 payments. Weighted meaning a payment made for $10,000 that was made on time would have a stronger weighting factor than a payment made for $30 that was paid 10 days ahead of time. We would skew the days to pay information very heavily towards the 10,000 over the 30 because the monetary value is higher. And there's an algorithm and a formula that determines that to come back at the number of days on average to pay using the last 12 payments in calculation. That same information is found on the debtor maintenance screen, can be right-clicked and viewed in the postings or on the totals tabs. For clients running the debtor finance facility, we have some dedicated reports for that functionality, and if that is applicable to you, do contact our support desk if any of this information needs to be further explained. End of month typically relates to the debtor statements. Most of the reports in Accrivia, there's only a handful of exceptions, can actually be run at any point in time historically by stipulating the time frame. The statements for the debtors must be run prior to running the end of month rollover, or the information we need to present on the statement will now be rolled into history and the statement report will ignore it. So this is one of the examples of a report that must be run at the appropriate time in terms of the sequence of events. Debtor transaction reports relate to the header type information. We have a separation between payments and adjustments or receipts and invoices if we wish, invoices and credit notes, invoices and credit notes with stock available as well. The Administration 1 and Administration 2 tabs show reports that are typically related to the administration of the debtors' accounts. Things like credit limits, those that have exceeded credit limits, audit type reports, delivery checking reports, cartage reports, all of these are found on the Administration tabs. The mail merge facility allows us to extract out information for the purpose of a mail merge. There are other facilities in this area with regards to bulk emailing of clients, and those features are being further developed on an ongoing basis, so do keep in touch with the support desk on that. If you're running the credits reason feature, where you demand a reason against any debtor's credit issue, the reports for this is found on the Debtor Credits tab. If you're running the Accrivia production system, the manufacturing, reports related to the production elements for debtors' orders is found on this tab. And if you're running the standing orders system for the debtors, those reports are found here. The inventory reports are also broken up into tabs representing the natural grouping of reports of a similar nature. For clients running our warehousing module, most of those reports have the word warehouse or WH in the name somewhere. Some of these reports would still work and apply to non-warehousing setups, but some are exclusive and only applicable to clients running the warehousing or the multiple branch modules. The first tab relates to pricing reports. And some of these reports are typically customized from one client to another to reflect the type of information that they're most interested in seeing. This one, for example, shows the cost, the margin, and the highest sell price. This has 2 lines per stock entry. It is a little more cluttered, has the markup, not the margin. So our general recommendation would be run some of these reports. If they answer all the questions and cover your needs, then that's great. If not, identify the reports that are closest to what you require and send them through to the support desk, clearly indicating on that report the alteration you'd like made, so as we capture the exact information or layout you're after, and then we will customize that and send it back and put it on your server. So while the first tab relates to pricing information in terms of our selling, the second tab here relates to information more around the purchasing side of things and adjustments with regards to the stock purchasing and the price and the impact on the system as a result. This report, for example, is the hard copy representation of the pricing history information that's found on the price history tab of the stock maintenance screen. Again, run each of these reports, have a look, decide on the relevance. Stock on hand reports relate to the stock on hand in the warehouse, generally at that point in time. Some of the movement reports will allow us to arrive at a stock on hand at a point in time. And the stock valuation reports include the cost base, be that the standard cost, average cost, or last cost, with the stock on hand values to arrive at a valuation of the stock at that point in time. This particular report is an as at right now type report, indicated by the lack of date selection, whereas some of these reports allow us to stipulate the ending date of the time frame, giving us a stock valuation at that point in time, which might be quite appropriate to do if we were doing journals or considering our June 30 stock on hand balances, for example, for our final accounts. This report allows us to pick up the stock information, but it will group it up as per the purchaser's accounts in the inventory group screen. In this data, they're all linked to the same. But if you did break your purchases down into broader groups for the purpose of the general ledger profit and loss reporting or other areas as well, you would find that we present the stock on hand information as per the general ledger account structure, allowing you to do your end of month stock journals, etc. The purchase orders tab relates to all the purchase orders in the system, be they open purchase orders, historic purchase orders. The all would pick up current and historic, those that have already been filled. Depending on the report, you may have the ability to choose the status of the purchase order. And as you can see, there's a lot of selection fields to work with to limit or to hone in on the actual data that we're looking for. As per the rest of the system, double click to bring up a selection list. For the various items. The Inventory Levels tab speaks of information that is set up in the system to maintain appropriate stock levels, or reports that allow you to determine what is going on in terms of warehouse levels and your expectations. Some of these reports will be built in such a way that we're picking up information to try and interpret it in a way that's meaningful. You may find you want to alter the formula or the algorithm that is running to determine what fulfills that criteria. The forecast report being a typical one that from one organisation to another often has different meaning in terms of how they do their forecasting. So we might alter that report and any of the other reports associated with that kind of approach to actually suit the formulas in question, to actually suit the formulas of that organisation. The other tab relates to stock take sheets, stock file maintenance type information, barcode listings if you're running your barcode printer and you've got your fonts installed so the barcodes come out. Etc. Lastly, the manufacturing tab is only applicable for those clients running the Accrivia manufacturing system where you raise manufacturing orders and achieve them. The jobs system is broken down into 6 or 7 tabs related to job file maintenance type information, job listings, etc. All the reports related to the estimating side of the organisation. So for contract work, where we are estimating the job, and then we are tracking the variations and then the actuals, the costs incurred. For do and charge works, this would not be applicable. It's only related to contract works. All the posting reports relate to actuals being posted to the jobs, costs that have been incurred. We have summary reports, detailed reports, the job dollars and job dollars 2 relates to financial dealings with the client for the job. So while this is around the cost base information, this is around the billing side of things. We also would include the work in progress type reports because they're obviously financially related. Profit and loss reports, as the name suggests, relates to the profitability of your jobs. We will always separate out the contract works from the do and charge works. And you can see the hint here that indicates the way the formulas are working in terms of the way we're presenting that information. The job quotes tab may or may not be applicable depending on how you're creating your quotes, which then become jobs if they're won, and whether you're using the debtors system or the job entry system directly to create those quotes. But this tab would include any reports related to the quoting side of the business. The general ledger has two groups only, and these reports relate to all the aspects of the general ledger in terms of extracting data out that has occurred. And depending on the nature of the report you choose, depending on the time frame and the report will obviously then depend on the type of information you're getting. Trial balance report, running through some more typical ones, gives you your credit and debit balances for each account for the time frame selected. Balance sheet and profit and loss reports are set up as per the other training videos in the report layout menu. You can choose to have 2 columns or 4 columns. You can choose to compare the columns or not, and you can choose to whether the information is of a budgetary nature or an actuals nature. We can also drive the information straight out to Excel in the layout of the profit and loss or the balance sheet report. The purpose behind this is to open up the availability of space because we are limited on an A4 page to only fitting certain amount of information at a reasonable point size for fonts. We can go out to Excel instead and create virtually an unlimited number of rows and columns to represent the data. The setup and the maintenance of that is outside the scope of this video because I'm covering the actual running of reports. Once again, I just encourage you, if you're in the general ledger side of things, to run each of these, have a look at the information that's coming out, and then make some notes as to the ones that are more applicable for you. I will mention this report quickly. It allows us to look at the information in the system based on the module that posted it. So sometimes when we have an account balance that's not what we expect, it's possible that other journals have been made to that account outside of the primary modules. For example, an account that's normally controlled by the purchasers from the creditors might have had some cash book or some general ledger posting done to it, resulting in the imbalance between the creditors report and the general ledger report. In that situation, I would encourage people to run the report by module. You would probably select a starting and ending account range so you didn't have so much information to look at, and then look at the information in terms of the source. So if we did find, for example, that the general ledger had postings going to an account that we did not expect to be impacted by the GL, that may well be the answer to the question of the imbalance. The ledger search screen is also very handy to look up any information that's been posted to a given account and drill it down, and we can preview or print the information that we get. We can also take it to the clipboard and paste it into Excel for further analysis if we wish. The cash book menu is the postings in the system related to a cash book. And a lot of these reports represent the same information, presented a slightly different way. The detailed one would show the actual payments made from the various modules in the system, whereas the summary report would show the deposit line if those transactions had been through the banking process. Once again, work through these reports, establish their meaning in terms of your understanding, and then note them for future reference and usage as appropriate. The payroll reports are broken down into 6 tabs. The first tab covering the file maintenance type reports. The second tab covering information relating to the pay postings or timesheet type data from an employee perspective. The third tab is the same information but from a department perspective. So while this report will show us the totals or the time frame postings for the companies and departments by employee, this would give us the same information but broken down in a departmental sense. The reports will of course tie back together in terms of their end values because it's coming from the same source. Accruals relates to the accrual system within Accrivia for annual leave, sick leave, or personal leave, RDO, and long service leave. We have financial ones and movement reports. Administration typically relates to those reports that are part of the administration process for payroll. So we've included super here, and some reports for analysis purposes. Who hasn't worked for a period of time? Income versus wage expense allows us to report on the efficiency of our employees based on the billing that was achieved for a given time frame. And this of course only works where we've joined the employee back to the appropriate billing code, which can be set up in the system. And then in certain industries, we have further on costs around the area of entitlements. Income protection, for example. These are the reports that provide that information.